Dr. Henry has a thriving practice in New York as a Mohs surgeon and cosmetic dermatologist. She shared with us her journey on social media and in traditional media that has grown immensely to where she is a regular contributor on The Today Show and other NBC productions. Dr. Henry shared important tips about maintaining your brand integrity as you start your social media journey, and even some tips on building relationships to grow the opportunity for brand partnerships and media appearances.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Med Creator 101. I'm Mimi Banks, the founder of MB Social, and as always, I'm here with my amazing co-host, board-certified dermatologist, Medfluencer, Dr. Patella.
Good to see you again, Mimi, and we're excited to be joined by our guest, Dr. Michelle Henry. Dr. Henry, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
We're so excited to have you. Before we start, we'd like to get to know you in a personal way that has nothing to do with dermatology or social media or medfluencing. Are you up for a few questions?
I am.
Great. So, city life or countryside?
Ooh, that's hard. It depends on what part of life. Right now, I'm living city life. I'm energized by it. I'm inspired by it. So I pick city life for now.
Online or in-store shopping?
Ooh, I'm so busy. 90% of my shopping is done online.
Nah, same. Cooking at home or dining out?
The right answer would be cooking at home, but dining out.
Paperback or audiobook?
Paperback. I learn so much more by when I'm reading for like the joy of reading, it's paperback. But if I'm just trying to stuff in information, like business information, I do a lot of like audiobooks for business. But if I'm doing it for the joy of reading, paperback always.
Adventure sports or a relaxing spa day?
That's hard. You know what? Adventure sports.
Anyone in particular?
Actually, adventure for me may not be adventurous for others. So like, I like hiking. I've been going to Canada a lot, so I've been getting into ATVing. So I've been liking that. But hiking and biking, I was in Italy for the summer and went like biking throughout Tuscany. I really do like that.
I think that's pretty adventurous.
I think so. For me, yeah. For the city girl, yes, that's adventurous.
I think an ATV is pretty adventurous. What do you think, Dustin?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I live in Idaho where ATVs are pretty common here, people driving around on them, but definitely that categorizes as adventure. For our listeners, Dr. Henry practices in New York City, right in the heart of Manhattan. And how long have you been in practice there, Dr. Henry?
Well, I moved to New York in 2009, so I think I've been practicing here now 12 years, 13 years.
I learned through another podcast that your career was kind of inspired by your mom's healthcare journey. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into dermatology?
Yes. So it was actually my great aunt. So my great aunt was raised with me like a grandmother. She died of breast cancer when I was 8. And we just found it really, really late. There was not much we could do. My family was already originally Grenadian, so we moved to the country and didn't have health insurance and everything was just far gone. And they excised it. She knew that she was going to pass. So for the last 6 months of her life, she kind of sat me on her knee. We talked about all the things I would do. We talked about life and dating and school and obviously my career. And we decided that I was going to cure cancer and that I was going to be a cancer doctor. I actually thought I was going to be a breast oncologist. And then when I got to med school, I realized that wasn't quite for me. And my very first mentor was a Mohs surgeon. So I actually went into dermatology because I wanted to do Mohs surgery. And so in med school, did that little mini rotation first. And my mentor said, if you love this, then you have to go into derm. And so I negotiated with the powers that be and I was able to do my derm rotation a little early, absolutely fell in love with it. And that was it. My mom, however, did play a really important part of my journey. So she's a nurse. And so after deciding I was going to do medicine, I didn't know really what capacity. I was 8, right? I think that following year, they did take your daughter to work day. And so I went to work with her and I was with the nurses, but I kept staring at the doctors. I liked their little huddle. I liked the very important conversations they seemed to be having. So she went and told them that I think she's more interested in this. And they found like a little white coat for me. I'm not sure how they got this. They found the stethoscope and it was the coolest day of my life. And that was it. So I was going to be a doctor from that day, no matter what.
That's such a fun story, and some powerful women in your life inspired you very early on. And sorry to hear about the loss of your great aunt, but she sounds like she was an amazing person to have those kind of conversations with you at a young age.
Yeah, she was absolutely incredible.
And did you want any specialty in dermatology?
So I am a Mohs surgeon. So I did a Mohs fellowship with Suzanne Ulbricht in Boston and then came back here and started practicing. I still do Mohs surgery and I've done it for my entire practice and it's very important and meaningful to me. And because of Mohs, that really kind of informed my aesthetic skills. So I started doing Mohs procedures and doing lasers and getting into fixing my scars and realized that, hey, I'm quite good at this. I'm really procedurally oriented. And then when I was even in fellowship, I created an aesthetic fellowship, like kind of aesthetic sessions for a lot of the residents. So that kind of grew my practice and my love and my understanding. My personal practice has always been half Mohs and half aesthetics since I started.
And you've really carved out a name for yourself in the busiest city in America, in New York City. But at the same time, you've generated a personality where you're contributing on traditional media through the Today Show and other media appearances. What does your day-to-day look like right now? How much time are you spending in clinic, and how much time are you working as a news contributor?
Yeah, so my days look very different. Every single day is different. So my office is structured so that Mondays are kind of like my like media flex day. So I do some social media, I do a lot of media, I do a lot of like writing and pitching on those days. I do any kind of like fast media, like things that where they need me really quickly. They know that if there's like something new that happens on a Monday, they can get me. I'm not in office. On early Tuesdays, they can get me. I'm not in office. And then throughout the week, it's a little bit more difficult for kind of like that fast 24-hour news cycle, things that we can't plan. But for longer lead things, when I'm on like the Today Show, I know a few weeks in advance and I do that either every few weeks or every week. And then other media that I do because of my relationship. So if there's like media where they can film in my office, and that happens all the time. So a lot of folks recently, Inside Edition popped in to talk to me about Brandy Gladville, if I said her name correctly, that had the potential condition that she thought they were parasites. It's likely an aesthetic concern or a consequence of aesthetic procedures, but they hopped in to talk to me about that. And so a lot of the folks who have relationships with me kind of know my schedule and also know my flexibility. So I kind of have to be ready and able to make myself camera ready at all times.
That's so cool. And I think so many people aspire to be on TV. I'd love to learn more how you moved from practicing successful dermatologist in New York City to media personality.
This is an excellent question because it's not something that was like on my horizon ever. It wasn't in my on my vision board, it just kind of happened. So when I first moved to New York, I joined a really busy aesthetic practice. And obviously I wasn't busy. I was moving from Boston in fellowship. I didn't have a patient base. The office was super busy with really popular doctors. And I thought, like, I have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of financial resources. What do I do to grow my name? And I started doing social media at that time. So that really helped. And that was a time before there were a lot of derm influencers. I remember the first time I injected myself with Botox, it was like pandemonium. There were people emailing me and saying, you don't do that. And now everyone does it and does all sorts of things. But it was a little bit more provocative at that time. And because of that, a lot of people were drawn to me. So I started doing collaborations and that really helped me. And I think that a lot of people would look to me for questions. And so then reporters started looking to me for questions, and that kind of grew my print media. And after they interviewed me and they realized that they liked my speaking style, they liked the fund of knowledge that I had, they liked how I engaged them, and it slowly started leading into television. I think before I did like traditional news media, I started doing some things like I started going on Dr. Oz with brands that I worked with. And I think once they start to see that, hey, you're good on camera, and this producer world was very small, they move around a lot. And so once they started to know me, it really grew based on my relationships and time. It all seems pretty short, but I think I've been doing that now, going on 10 years of working with media, and now it's more consistent. But I've been doing it for a long time, and it just grew slowly with time.
The more people we speak to and the successful ones are the ones who started out with a true reason behind why they're on social media and why they do what they do, is to stand out, is to educate, and is to help make a name for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do it very intentionally or you get lost. I think a lot of people, if you're doing it just to be cool, you're doing it because this is a cool trend now. I think you really have to, it sounds trite and cheesy, but to begin with the end in mind, and really think about what do I want? What do I want my brand to look like? What is okay and comfortable with me? If someone was to describe me, how would they describe me? I remember once, it's a silly exercise, but I remember once a producer asked me, if you were to describe yourself as a room, how would you describe yourself? And I couldn't. And then she described me and she described someone else, and it was spot on. What do you emit? What do you put out there? And is that consistent? And also just being really mindful of what that was. And I think I was always really mindful of who I wanted to be, what I wanted to communicate, what I wanted that to feel like from the very beginning. And I think I've been pretty consistent with that.
That's really incredible and important, which is probably how it got you to where you are on the Today Show. I'm a huge fan. I actually met Chanel. We sat next to each other at the Grammys. and I just kept in touch ever since. I like her a lot. So what is your role with the Today Show? Tell us more.
I am an official on-air contributor. So I am officially with the Today Show. I'm a part of the Today family. And that means that I work with Today. I work at NBC, anything in the NBC like family portfolio I work with, but primarily with Today. And so I'm on Today at least twice a month, but I'm working to do it more frequently weekly, working to grow different arms of that. So looking to grow the beauty arm, both on air and digitally. And so looking to be there and educate and keep myself involved and a part of the team as much as I can.
I want to go into like the first time you were invited on the Today Show. Was this unexpected? And how did you feel getting that invitation and preparing for that? And along the way, your skills on TV and in social media are phenomenal. Did you do any formal media training or are you just a natural?
I never did formal media training. I actually once thought about doing it. I hired someone, it was a complete scam. I won't say who it was or what it was, but I got there, I paid them, they made me read lines and they're like, you don't need training. And that was it. So be very careful. Look for reputable people, run them by me. I'll tell you if it's the same one that I got caught into. So be careful with that. I think the way I learn is the way we all learn. And I think physicians are particularly good at this. We're detail oriented, a lot of it is like watching patterns, looking at people, taking notes on what resonates, what looks good, what feels good, taking notes on what doesn't. And so I, like all of us, I studied it. I studied people. I studied people who I like. I studied people who emotionally connect with me when I watched it on TV, because I think that's really important. I studied people who I thought were able to handle complex information in a way that was like accessible and kind and didn't feel like obnoxious know-it-alls, but still I trusted that they were actually experts and that they still maintain that like academic integrity. So I found those individuals and kind of made them my like virtual or digital mentors, right? And I studied them. I self-tape. I watched myself. I studied myself because I'm actually quite shy. For me to say this that I'm doing this now is wild because I'm the girl in theater that wanted to cry if they put me on the stage. And I actually think that's part of why I became good at it, because it is that like, I don't know if I'm good at this. So I'm going to work really hard to make sure that I learn it, right? Because it's not my natural skill set. And I actually think that was a part of what made me quite good.
100%. You've certainly mastered the art, and it's obvious with what you're doing in your career and being a very regular on the Today Show. What kind of emotions or feelings or thoughts did you have on that first invitation?
The first time I was like, how'd they find me? That was my first question to myself. Like, this is really cool. I'm so excited. How'd they find me? And then, am I up for this challenge? Like, how do I do this? How do I stick the landing? As they say, you only have one time to make a first impression and you want to make sure it's a good one. So I think I probably did not sleep that first night. It's like, when you take tests in college and you're running the answers through your head before the test. I was doing that all night into the morning. It's with anything, a lot of us speak, we give conferences, and that anxiety is there until you hit. Once you start, the anxiety washes away and then you do the job. But it was kind of that moment like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is not what I expected, but let's do it. So yeah, I'm forever grateful for that day. But I remember the call. I remember the topic. I remember the first time it was them reaching out to me and not someone else coordinating it and feeling like, gosh, I did it one step at a time.
And what was the topic?
Winter skin. It was winter skincare.
And how did those topics arise? Do you pitch them? Is it depending on the moment in time, the holidays, what's trending? How do the topics work?
Yeah. So now that I'm a part of the team, I pitch. If they have a topic, they'll bring it up to me and then I'll kind of, grow something around it. But I pitch regularly now. So I do a lot of writing and pitching and staying on top of what's interesting and new and timely. So now that's a big part of what I do. But prior to being an actual part of the team, they would pitch me. And then when they would pitch me, if there's something that I thought was interesting, I'd say, hey, maybe we do this next time as well. So I didn't pitch as much before. They kind of got used to me in topics that I was good at. But now I pitch all of the time.
How do you know what you've done is good? Because when you are in person, in front of a camera, it's just you and the camera. When you're on social media, as you said, people are writing you, telling you what to do, what not to do, not to self-inject. What kind of feedback do you get, or how do you know what you did is good?
Well, I think all of us on social media, we know we get feedback. So there are the platforms that people are very spirited with their feedback.
Spirited is a great word.
And then you need a committee. You need a board of your life, right? You need a board of directors that is honest and that will tell you, that makeup wasn't great for you. You're speaking too quickly. You pronounce that word incorrectly. Let's not do that this next time, So you need your own board of directors that you can trust to tell you this is the right direction. This feels good. So you need people that you trust. Having people in the industry that you trust is really good because they're going to be able to look at you with a very unbiased eye and they're just really looking you as a product, right? As talent. And you have to kind of extract your emotions from that so you can make sure that you're doing the job correctly. So I have my board of directors. My mom is chairman of that board, right? But I have some other people on that board who love me and are not afraid to be very honest with me. And I'm very honest with myself. And I think that, and being a perfectionist often has a negative connotation, but I think there are some really amazing things about that when it's not left unchecked. And I think a lot of us in medicine are that way. And so my own perfectionism and being able to like pull those things apart without internalizing it and being hard on yourself. It's all about just, study and perfecting your craft.
I think there's a couple of points you said in there, even going back to not having formal media training, but you would record yourself, you would watch yourself. And I think that's something a lot of people don't do when it comes to social media. And I think there's great value in recording something that you're never going to post. And I encourage people, you need to watch yourself without audio and see, is your nonverbal communication saying the same thing? And then you need to close your eyes and only listen to the audio and see, is your audio, is it good quality? Are you using the right inflections? Are you coming across as somebody who's excited about this topic? And those are great ways that people can essentially train themselves and use your board of directors to do those things for you too and give you that kind of feedback. I think that's really valuable.
First of all, the fact that you were able to train yourself, as Dustin mentioned, is amazing. I don't think that everybody has the same skills or the same drive, but I think that also speaks to why you're so successful, why Dustin has also a large community, because it is that long game, because you have mastered your craft and also have mastered what it's like to communicate and engage people. I'm curious now, there's a big focus on where you are publicly. You are really evolved. You talked about like media and your brand. What role is social now in your overarching brand?
I will say that the last few years between starting my practice, growing lots of other opportunities, my social strategy is something that I want to grow and fine tune. So for me, at least, it's not where I want it to be, but it still plays a huge role. It's important. And the role of social just in general has grown astronomically since I've started. It's definitely something that I want to focus on and fine tune and that I'm putting tremendous focus behind this year. So it's still critically important to me. It's changing a lot. And so I am right now, taking surveys and studying like what resonates, try to figure out the trends. We know the algorithms change, but also, the type of content that resonates with individuals and our continuously changing attention spans, right? And appetite for certain things is changing and how we engage social media. A lot of people may watch TikTok without audio, right? So you have your captions on correctly? Are they engaging? So just learning and trying to fine tune a lot of that this year is a major focus of mine.
That's great. What advice would you give medfluencers or someone who is starting? I know you mentioned relationships, but someone who wants to secure a TV gig or even get a regular spot on a morning show as they're evolving their brand, as they want to really become a media personality. What advice would you give someone?
I mean, you could always try to pitch yourself as well. Like initially I thought that like cold pitches didn't work, right? But I've seen people get on with cold pitches. So maybe someone can't make a warm introduction for you, but maybe you have someone in common. There's so many producers. There's so many people. It's a 24-hour news cycle. There is frankly, a shortage of information. People are always pulling for more content. Things are always changing. And so you could cold pitch yourself, look for those relationships, use your LinkedIn to try to develop those relationships. Persistence. It's a kind of a slow and steady battle, but if you don't have those relationships yourself, you can kind of strategize to make them.
And that's similar advice to what I've got, and I'd love to bounce this off you, is also understanding these producers and these editors at even your local television station, which is where most people are going to start. That is their job, is to find stuff that they can put on the news. And if you're in a sleepy little town, sometimes it's a stretch for them to always have something. And so if you can reach out with a good idea, usually you can find an email address off of the website if you want to submit a tip or you want to reach out to the editor, and you can always just try editor at the call sign and pitch yourself. And I've done that and gotten on my local TV stations by doing that because they are looking for stuff all of the time. And if you can surface a good idea, you do stand a good chance of getting yourself there.
Yeah. And most of the producers aren't big names themselves, right? Maybe the senior ones have become big names, but most of them are still managing their own social media. So that's another way that you could potentially reach out.
And speaking of social media, you were part of CeraVe's award-winning campaign with actor Michael Cera, which culminated in an incredible Super Bowl commercial. What was it like?
It was really, really cool. Like I think I didn't realize you're happening and we're all working, we're so busy and things happen. And I don't take enough time to like sit and take inventory of like what I've done and like process that something is cool. It's like a year later, I'm like, whoa, that happened. That was really cool. So I just never sit still long enough to do it. And even the day of the Super Bowl, like I remember they called me and they were like, yeah. Initially, I had a speaking role and I was so excited about that. I was like, I'm officially an actor, right? Getting ready for my Emmy. They called and said, you know what, unfortunately, you're not speaking, but you still communicate very well, right? And so now I laugh because I'm like, I see what I communicated and why that was really funny. But at the time I felt like, oh, I didn't get to speak. And I actually was going to throw a Super Bowl party and I was like, oh, I'm not even speaking. And then when it happened, I was like, I should have thrown the party. It was just a really cool experience. And it's the importance of, again, relationship. I'd worked with CeraVe for a very, very long time, even before they started doing as much work as they do with influencers. And so, I have a long love for the brand. And so it was very natural to me. It's not a brand that I have to try to promote because I love it. I use it. Our office is full of it. And being there with other colleagues that I love and respect was really, really special too. When Michael Cera walked in, then I was kind of like, okay, this is real now. And he was so lovely. Like, even while we were filming, he goes, okay, Michelle, throw me the line again. And I was like, is this my real life? It was really, really cool. But with all things, when we're doing it, we're just working. So you kind of steady yourself, work, you take the feedback, you listen to the cues, you listen to what they're saying behind the scenes. Even though people think you can't hear them, you hear it and you know if you're doing a good job or a bad job, and you make your adjustments and you ask for feedback. Because at the end of the day, in that moment, you're the talent, right? And you want to make sure that you're putting out a product that reflects their vision, but also reflects what you believe, the excellence that you know that you can put out there.
I know you had a big fan response. It was all over my social media. My dermatologist is on the Super Bowl. I really saw it everywhere. It was really so nice to see the support. I know the people in the beauty community in New York, they were so excited. I know I was watching the Super Bowl and I saw your nod. I remembered very distinctly your nod. You did communicate an effective nonverbal communication. Did it very well. Passed the message very well.
Thank you. I have one of my friends, she's an actual actress. And she was like, you could do this. You're a very good nonverbal actor. You communicate your emotions very well. And I was like, oh, thank you.
Add that to your resume, your set of skills.
We'll get you some lines on the next one. One thing that I admire about your work on traditional media and on social media is your brand integrity, the way that you present yourself across social media platforms and on traditional media through the Super Bowl commercial. As many people that listen to this podcast are going to be embarking upon their own social media journey, they may or may not have aspirations for traditional media. What kind of advice would you give to somebody that's just starting out to kind of maintain that brand integrity as they grow as a physician? Because I think that's very important. It's easy to be unprofessional. It's easy to dip your toes in uncharted waters and get in trouble. And all of a sudden you've got negative reviews on your practice, or you lose a brand deal because of something you said on Twitter 10 years ago. What kind of advice would you have for somebody starting out that wants to build their own personal brand through any type of media and maintain their own integrity?
I always ask myself, does my online persona reflect the doctor that I would like to have as my physician? Am I doing anything that would make me question my integrity, my judgment? At the end of the day, we're paid for our judgment, our integrity, our judgment, our leadership. And am I doing anything that would make me question that as a doctor, And it's different. It takes all types, Some patients would love a doctor that's doing something that to me would be distasteful, right? So you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, what kind of career do you want to have? What are your descriptors when your patients look at you? How will they describe you from your social media? For me, I don't necessarily want them to describe me as like, she's fun and she's like unhinged and, like whatever. Some people are okay with those descriptors. That's not the doctor that I would choose.
You don't think people want a doctor that's unhinged?
I don't know.
Not everybody wants a Dr. Miami. No offense to Dr. Miami if you're listening.
Yeah. So for me, it's always like, is this the doctor that I would trust with my secrets? Is this a doctor that I trust to not violate me to make sure they get a social media picture, right? Is this a doctor that I know will keep their integrity above all things? Because at the end of the day, social media, TikTok could be gone. All of this could be gone. But what I've worked for the past 20 plus years is what I intend to do until not working anymore. And that is what is sacrosanct to me. So I just want to make sure that whatever I'm doing doesn't compromise the kind of patients that I want to come to me.
I think that's beautiful.
I think that to me is the best possible way to be as a physician. And that's kind of part of the physician's oath. I know that Dustin and I talk about this all the time, about how you show up and how your personality of who you are, especially as a physician, is integrated into your brand.
Exactly. And I think there are some articles, I think Allure just had one, and they're questioning, does your social media brand always translate to patients in office? For some it can, and for others it might not. And so you also want to ask yourself, what kind of career do you want to have? And I'm not here to judge anyone's career. If you say, you know what, I really don't want to practice a lot, there's no judgment there. Like, that's what you want to do. And you say, like, I'd rather go, that's fine. But I think you have to be very mindful of that, because what we are doing socially really does impact our practices in meaningful ways.
I couldn't agree more, especially as a potential patient that you see on social media, that you see a physician, and then you're going to make a judgment call about what you assume them to be like. And then when you go in office and realize that they are or they aren't, that's going to also impact whether you want to go back again.
Yeah, that's key. We know that there's a lot of doctors out there for people to choose from, and we will all naturally find the people that we vibe with, that we trust with our secrets, we trust with our health, we trust to violate our bodily autonomy. And that will show up online as well. And the people that are likely to follow you online, you want them to be the same people that would trust you with that level of care. And everybody has a different approach to it. To Dr. Miami is much more flamboyant, and that's great. And he gets patients that want him because of those characteristics. And you get the patients that come to you because of the characteristics that you put out. So I think that's excellent advice that anybody starting a journey on social media should take seriously as they start making those videos and forging relationships to grow their own personal brand.
I agree. And to piggyback off of something you just said, Dustin, about those relationships, that's a theme that I've heard throughout our conversation, is that you've been able to build these relationships for more than 10 years in building your brand, building your practice, building your patients. How did you start building relationships with brands?
Really, they found me, and they found me from social media, because it was at a time when a lot of people were on social media. So it was harder for them to find people who could speak to skincare, speak to beauty in eloquent ways. Producers are still looking at our social media. Like, I can't tell you how many times I did a social media series on hair, which I still need to finish. And I got so many TV hits with hair questions. So people they're like looking at all of our social media to see, like, who speaks to these topics in a way that will resonate with their audience. And so my first brand deals came from them just seeing me do social media, realizing that I could speak to beauty or skincare and maintain whatever like academic integrity they thought reflected their brand well. And so they really just found me through that.
And who was your first brand deal?
I don't know if it was my first brand deal, and it was Curel. It was actually a big like casting. And 3 people reached out to me and they're like, you're a dermatologist, you should go to this casting. And I go to the casting, and there were a ton of derms there, and everyone had an agent but me. So I was like, I'm a goofball. I'm not going to get this. I don't have an agent. Like, everyone's a professional. Here I am, just like scrappy little dermatologist. And so because of that, I went in there and I was like, I'm just going to give it what I have. I'm just going to be myself and let my hair down, because I don't have an agent and I'm not, as shiny as everyone else. And I ended up getting it. They liked that, whatever I gave them. And it ended up being like, I remember we filmed in California and we had all these other things. But that was my first big project I did while we were filming. And it was very cool to me.
That's amazing. I'm surprised everyone had agents.
Yeah. And this was a million years ago. Well, not a million, maybe like 2000, I'd say maybe 15 or 16. And I saw everyone's name on the list and they had to write if they had an agent or not. And I was so embarrassed that I didn't have an agent. I was like, I'm not a professional. But yeah.
Well, I can't believe how quickly this has gone. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this incredible journey from dermatologist to media star to Super Bowl excellent nonverbal communication.
Thank you. This is fun. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Henry, if people want to find you on social media, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Michelle Henry, and you can find me on TikTok at Skin Doc Talks. And then my practice, Skin and Aesthetic Surgery, is in Manhattan, in Midtown East, 56th Street. You can always find our practice if you want to see me in real life. or we can engage in social.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure to link those down in the show notes for the podcast and on our video descriptions. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Med Creator 101 podcast. We were pleased to be joined by Dr. Michelle Henry, a practicing board-certified dermatologist in New York City. Dr. Henry has a thriving practice in New York as a Mohs surgeon and cosmetic dermatologist. She shared with us her journey on social media and in traditional media that has grown immensely to where she is a regular contributor on The Today Show and other NBC productions. Dr. Henry shared important tips about maintaining your brand integrity as you start your social media journey, and even some tips on building relationships to grow the opportunity for brand partnerships and media appearances. Dr. Henry can be found at her practice, Instagram, and TikTok, which we'll link down in the podcast description. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.